many of us know white papers as something that lays out technology and roadmap, but due to new regulations, white papers are increasingly becoming a regulatory document that tokens need to enter markets and expand their centralized exchange listings. So that's where we hope with our AI, where we automatically generate white papers for them.
This podcast is sponsored by Coin ATM Radar. When buying crypto with cash, an ATM is much more reliable and safer than meeting some random person in a random place. And unlike an exchange, which could freeze your account, you truly own all the crypto you buy. With Coin ATM Radar, you could find crypto ATMs and other services where you can buy and sell cryptocurrencies for cash. On their website, you can search by coin, address, if the ATM supports selling as well as buying, and you can also search by geo area, country, state, city. You can also check and compare actual current fees at different ATMs. If you want to find out more, head over to coinatmradar.com, which is coinatmradar.com. Hey everyone, I have the fantastic pleasure today of speaking with the one and only Shota Natenadze. How's it going, man?
All good, man. Thanks. Happy to be here. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Very busy day, week, of course. Crypto never sleeps, and we're getting into the mass adoption era very soon, and so there's a never-ending list of things to do. So we met at Web3 Amsterdam in Dubai. Just kidding, of course, Amsterdam. We met in Web3 Amsterdam, and we're kind of talking a little bit about Flexicheck, the company you work with, and some of the interesting ways that technology is intersecting with the new regulatory regime, I would say, particularly in Europe. And I just thought it would be an interesting thing for people to get kind of a perspective on, because a lot of people who don't work in the crypto world directly, especially in like the business side of things, have no idea of like how things are working out as far as what regulators think, what they don't think, all that kind of thing, and what tools that people could use. Everyone just, I guess, assumes that they just have to sort of pray that things turn out well, or that they have to have a lot of money to hire a big law firm. And so just with all that as context, would you mind quickly introducing yourself and then also explaining how you kind of got into crypto to begin with?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation. So, a few words about myself. I started crypto 4 years ago, I would say. This was when I first arrived to UK from Georgia. I'm originally from Georgia, and the problem I had is that I couldn't send money back to Georgia via traditional banking rails. So I just started searching for alternatives, and I found out about XRP, also USDT, and other coins, and I started using them for transfers. And since I got more, acquainted with it and more comfortable, I just dived deeper into it. And then my first professional encounter with crypto, more specifically crypto regulation, was at Cato Institute. This is a DC-based regulatory think tank slash organization where we were working on advancing crypto forward regulation that today
Now,
we see coming out.
so with Cato, did you do an internship? Did you do work with them? What was your kind of involvement there?
Yeah, so I started as an intern initially,
Mm-hmm.
um, then became a fellow. But yeah, so I was at Cato Institute's Monetary and Financial Alternative Center,
Mm.
which is situated in DC. Um, and yeah, I spent there a few months.
Yeah, I was a Cato intern a long time ago, in many
Oh,
years ago.
really?
Yes, it's a small world. Also, one of my friends, who was a fellow intern at the time, was also from Georgia. So a very small world of
Great to hear.
coincidences. Yes.
Had no idea. What was the name of the guy? I might even know him.
Sulkan was his first name. I don't remember his last name. Something with a K, a long name.
Okay, cool. I'll
Yes.
I'll do the digging. Let's see if I can dox him.
Yes, that was 2007, so a long time ago.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, I derailed the whole thing with the Cato Institute comment.
Yeah. But yeah, maybe a few words about Flexicheck. So now I'm a founder of Flexicheck. Flexicheck is an AI-powered compliance decision engine for crypto asset service providers and crypto asset issuers. And basically, what we do is we leverage agentic AI, on-chain data integrations, as well as our own LLM to basically automate crypto compliance for regulated crypto entities. So think of exchanges, launchpads like Binance and others. But on the other hand, we also help token issuers, i.e., young teams and projects, to create compliant documentation and disclosure. Um, for example, think of white papers. Many of us know white papers as something that lays out technology and roadmap, but due to new regulations, white papers are increasingly becoming a regulatory document that tokens need to enter markets and expand their centralized exchange listings. So that's where we help with our AI, where we automatically generate white papers for them.
Yeah. So that's an interesting. It's kind of an interesting development because for the most part, when dealing with regulators around the world for a variety of issues, it does seem like there's a lot of opaqueness
Yeah.
between what regulators think, and a lot of times it's very much initiated by either the whatever entity decides to officially file for compliance or whatever with the regulator, or if there's a lawsuit from the regulator, that's kind of how it works out. Otherwise, there's no real interaction, and it is interesting to see kind of I guess a more proactive approach by going to first source documents. And so, of course, I used to be a journalist in a past life, and a good journalist does look for like source documents. They don't just repeat stories and things like that. And so, it's something that there's very few journalists in crypto, as it turns out, because the amount of misinformation is crazy. But
Yeah.
as far as like source, so do you have any insight onto how this happened to where regulators started to actually go to like a project's website and look into like the actual source documents listed there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just to take a step back and do sort of a global analysis, right? Uh, what's happening is that there is more institutional buy-in into crypto. There is more retail that's going into this maze, and then regulators are realizing that crypto is gaining significant momentum and is to some degree even posing systemic risk to the rest of the financial system, right? Because it has become a industry that is more than what's the market cap now, 3 trillion. Last time I checked, more or less. And then there is a lot of intermediated assets under management, right, from different traditional asset managers in terms of them entering in crypto through ETFs and other instruments. So I think what regulators realize is that, hey, this is something that is gaining momentum and investors are going in, and we need to follow them. So that's why they started to look at crypto as something more serious and started to regulate them. And then to answer your second part of the question, which is uh, directly why websites and why projects and why would the regulators start to regulate them? Well, every token is a tool that you can invest in, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
in traditional finance, what we have is that every investment product comes with some sort of disclosure and information with it. Now, this is something that applies generally to any kind of investment type, whether it's a crypto asset, a traditional financial asset, a stock, a commodity, or something else. So, really, what regulators are trying to do is apply the TradFi sort of regulatory approach to DeFi and other crypto projects. And the first and most sort of easy, low hanging fruit is to actually go to websites and mandate that, hey, you need to have clear information disclosures. You need to have clear white paper that lists your technology, your legal risks, and so forth. So forth. So that's why I think they started with this.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, it's a like, logical approach after all, but I guess regulators are actually starting to look into this kind of thing a lot more. Now, as far as so is the white paper primarily what? Let's just, I guess, talk about the EU for a second and MiCA, et
Yeah.
cetera. Is the white paper the primary thing that they look for on a website? So they go to website of, say, a project like, say, Dash, for example, and then they start looking through, and then until they find the white paper, and then they use that as the primary basis for how they interact with Dash and treat it, or are there other things they look at as well?
Yeah, great question. Maybe for the audience, MiCA is a marketing crypto assets regulation, which is a new regulation that kind of tries to establish a global, not global, but fully fledged framework for crypto regulation in the EU. Now, as it pertains to regulator actually going into websites, it's not really a regulator that will be going to CoinMarketCap and then checking each website and each token. What it is doing under white paper specifically is that it is telling crypto asset service providers, i.e., centralized exchanges, that hey, if you want to list a new token, you need to make sure that that token has technical, legal, operational, and other sort of disclaimers and risks clearly articulated in one way, shape, or form. And to do this, regulator is suggesting that hey, white paper is something that can cover all of this. And then the next step is that crypto as a service provider is regulated under EU, right? Let's say ESMA, which is European Securities and Markets Authority, that regulates the European crypto market. And then if I'm Binance and if I want to operate in the EU, I need to register and get the crypto as a service provider license. Now, one of the things that the regulator will look at, hey, okay, Binance is registered. What is
Mm-hmm.
Binance's internal policy as it pertains to them listing tokens? Do they follow the white paper recommendation that we gave, which is do they have the ability and the policy in terms of their listing team to actually go out to those projects' websites and find the white paper and then make sure that their website is in line with the white paper, and then how well are those two structured into their risk analysis when it comes to them listing the token. Sorry for the long answer, but just thought to
Yeah.
give a
it's a
context
it's
behind it.
comprehensive because it's a very difficult kind of a thing. So just focusing on the white paper aspect for a second. First of all, how, from your perspective, what's the state of crypto white papers today? Because I know a
Yeah.
lot of ones, like, so for example, Bitcoin has the most famous white paper by a very long shot. And it has Bitcoin and its purpose and the way it works are significantly different from the way the white paper was written. But the white paper's never been updated. It's kind of a historical document. And so for Bitcoin, it's obviously, it doesn't work out. There's a lot
Yeah.
of cases where you have projects that have either an outdated white paper like that, or just a very technical white paper on certain like mathematical things that doesn't describe, maybe governance or token allocations or things like that. So generally speaking, what percentage of the crypto space do you think has an actual useful white paper to look at for these purposes?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think you partially answered your own question yourself. So right now, there are a lot of white papers that were established or created before the regulation. Therefore, they do not follow the template that has been mandated. And this template is available on ESMA's website, and it has more than 100 different fields.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have learned. We went out to market and we analyzed thousands of white papers when we were training our own LLM. And exactly, most of them are outdated, but most of them are also very heavily focused on technical stuff and also on the community side and engagement side of things, right? And maybe you can see roadmap here and there and few disclaimers, but that's very rare. Now, when it comes to actually the MiCA standard white paper, there is an open source registry where all these white papers are registered, and stablecoin issuers are increasingly filing white papers at a rapid pace because they're a regulated entity, and they're in offer of, and they're backed by the real asset in terms of their currency being pegged to it, right? So they are increasingly sort of going after filing these white papers. When it comes to utility tokens, i.e., tokens like Dash, we also see those kind of tokens picking up white papers. For example, Obol Network, I'm sure you heard of them, have recently filed a MiCA white paper to ESMA. YoHolder also filed one very recently. So yeah, to summarize, it's picking up.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. It's so maybe a strange, nuanced question, but like let's say there's some project that has a historical white paper, like giving maybe the Bitcoin example that Bitcoin has an
Yeah.
old school white paper, but they sort of should have something that more accurately describes what it does today. And they decide to do something that's a little bit more in lines with like MiCA guidelines as far as that's concerned. So, do you ever have cases where you have like a present white paper and then a historical white paper on file, like multiple white papers? Like, this is the one that you should use for official purposes and registration and things like that. And then there's
Yeah.
kind of other ones that are either supplementary, technical, or just outdated or historical that are still available on like the website.
Yeah, so it's there's nothing that's stopping a project to have two white papers, right? The old one because maybe they want to keep their history on their website and they just want to have that ledger of how their white paper changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, they can still keep calling it a white paper, but then simultaneously they might have another version, which is the MiCA version of that white paper that they can file, that they can use when talking to exchanges, talking to investors and partners. Um, but for example, Bitcoin is a very interesting question, interesting case, because Bitcoin is permissionless. We don't really know who's behind it. So who's going to generate a MiCA standard white paper for Bitcoin, right?
Michael
Uh,
Saylor.
yeah, I think that's where we're going. So um, there is a fine line between a project having a team behind it who is responsible for its governance, growth, and so on, and therefore is by default responsible for filing that white paper. And there is other sort of permissionless world, for example, Pump.fun, right? When you can have a bot that launches thousands of coins
Mm-hmm.
in seconds. Now, no one is asking a meme coin to have a white paper.
Yeah, that makes sense. Uh, and on this whole subject, obviously there's a heavy emphasis on EU because MiCA is one of the more comprehensive crypto guidelines in the world. It's a lot, and I have a lot of people complaining about the new regulations, how bad things are, but also it makes things easier in some ways because you know where you stand. But so the whole white paper on file kind of strategy, have you seen much of that in other jurisdictions outside of Europe? Like, for example, maybe the US, maybe the UK is sort of a EU extension to a certain extent,
Yeah.
places like that. Have you seen this kind of practice becoming standardized in the world, or is it more heavily focused in Europe?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that the industry is moving towards in a global way. So, for example, if we look at UAE, we have a regulator there called VARA, uh, Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, which has which has come up with a very similar regulation to what MiCA is doing, and they also have a white paper requirement. And what we've done was that we analyzed MiCA white paper standard against VARA white paper standard, and we found more than 90% similarity between the fields.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is also adopted. We will be very soon adopted by US because US is playing the second mover advantage. UK already has a risk disclosure requirements under FinProm financial promotions regime. So yeah, definitely we're moving towards a standardized sort of white paper world where each token basically has a white paper which is equal to something like us people having passports, right?
Yeah, for sure. And so this has to be for a lot of people in the crypto world, especially early adopters. Like, let's just throw another name out there. It says something like Digibyte, which has been around for 11 or so years. Proof of work currency, very small volunteer team, as far as I understand it. For something like that, it does tend to be a burden to have to look for legal counsel for these kinds of things, right? Because you think, okay, me and some friends, we started a hobbyist project. We started just coding it up, sharing amongst friends. At some point, it had valuation on the market, and we're still the same people. But then all of a sudden, there's this regulatory uncertainty, this new way of doing things. And then I'm sure that and then it's intimidating to find a lawyer at that point and just say, hey, can you help us out here?
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's something that we encountered ourselves. Our CTO was a token issuer multiple times.
Mm,
And then when the MiCA struck, he was like, hey, what am I going to do? I only have certain amount of runway left from my ICO. I have not even listed on an exchange, and I need some. I need a venue, right, to attract more liquidity and grow my project. But then once he started to go out for exchanges, they started asking them for a white paper. Now, what they gave them was a technical white paper that he had on his docs page. But then
mm,
the answer he got back was, hey, this is not a legal disclosure. This is not a risk disclosure. Now, then he went to he went to a law firm and they asked him for 40K and 6 weeks to generate a white paper for him. And we were helping him during this project launch. And that's where we said, hey, this is a market opportunity, but then this is also unfair for the new startups and new teams because they should be focusing on growing their community, sort of attracting more liquidity, and engaging their members and just growing their ecosystem, not spending hours and human capital on legal sort of burdens. And that's where we come in. We automate that. We generate a white paper at a fraction of a cost in 40 hours, and then you're good to go and attack those listings and investors and just BD work, you know?
yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's a good opportunity to explain what Flexicheck is and how does it work.
Yeah, definitely. So we have two strands. We have token issuer product, and then we have crypto asset service provider product. So token issuer product is primarily the white paper generation. How it works is that it has been trained on multiple regulations, including MiCA, and then multiple sets of MiCA compliant white papers. And then we allow the project to sign up on our UI, send us a link to their docs website, and then answer a few questions. And based on that, our AI generates a white paper that is based on the ESMA guidelines and the ESMA standard of the white paper. So that's on the token side. We've been seeing some traction already, generating 4 white papers for top 50 market cap tokens, and then more than 15 white papers for lower market cap tokens. And then on the crypto asset service provider side, we have a token monitoring, white paper analysis, due diligence, and onboarding AI, which allows centralized exchanges to list and onboard tokens really as fast as DEXs do it. Because what's the problem today, right? Uh, Tokens get listed on a DEX, they appreciate in few hours after listing, but then if a centralized exchange wants to list them, they need to run all these different checks based on MiCA, right? They need to check their website, they need to check their adverse media, read their white paper, and so on. And after they're done with this check, the opportunity is gone, right? They're stalling
Mm.
the growth of the project, and themselves they are missing out on revenue. So here we enter our AI as well, and we allow them to fast track projects and without compromising on compliance quality, which allows them to capture more revenue. So this is the two sides of the product that we have.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so basically, so the process is you sign up, then you decide to generate a white paper, and then what kind of inputs do you give it to find the correct information to generate?
Yeah, so you know, if you don't have anything in terms of your presence on digital media, on digital world, then we cannot give you a white paper out of thin air. Unfortunately, our AI is not there as of yet. But we ask you for your website, your
Mm-hmm.
X, and then if you have a incorporation letter, or an entity or a legal letter about the entity that's behind the token or the project. We ask you for that. And then based on those inputs, our AI goes out, does deep research and reasoning and generates the white paper. And then if there are some key aspects missing, our AI automatically generates a small survey that has maximum 10 questions. And then once those questions are filled in, the whole white paper is baked. So it's an interactive sort of session where you go in, fill in 4 or 5 fields, and then you just log out, go to sleep or build your community. And then in 20 hours, you receive an email with a notification that your white paper has been generated.
Yeah, very interesting. And so, first of all, if there are some things that it gets, what's the ability to, I guess, modify it after it's generated? So, say it generates and then it says something that's maybe not 100% accurate because there might have been an outdated documentation or post that it pulled from or something like that. Is it easy then to kind of edit and then at the same time make sure that the edits still conform with the guidelines?
Yeah, great question. So once our users set up their login and their account, they can always go back and with a absolutely free cost enter. For example, I have updated my documentations page to reflect a new integration or a new protocol on my ledger. I resubmit the link to the documentation, and our AI automatically updates the specific section of the white paper and gives you back the updated white paper at no cost.
Yeah, interesting. So also in first of all, do you know if this is a completely novel business idea or are there other projects that are already trying to do something similar to this?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few players that are doing something similar to it, although we've done our market research very thoroughly, and most of these are still done in a manual way where you fill in 20,
Mm,
30 questions, wait for 2, 3 weeks, and still the cost is quite high. And then the quality of the white paper does come out decent. However, you can tell very often that there's the technical side is a bit lacking because there was not the crypto native guy behind
mm,
it, crypto native AI, in this case, guy that was writing it up by hand. Whereas we have two sections of the AI. One is the legal expert, another one is a blockchain expert.
mm.
And then before we send it out, we also have a team behind it that reviews it because AI can always hallucinate or have some error. So we make sure that real eyes and real experts have a read. If there is anything to correct, it gets corrected, and then your white paper arrives to you.
Yeah, so basically a lot of times when you if you had someone who let's just say they pay premium on X and then they have access to Grok or something and they decide, oh, well, let me have Grok generate my white paper. Maybe it'll get a lot of things right, but there's a lot of maybe nuance missing that you kind of need not only specialized models to get certain bits right, but also have actual expert review to make sure that you didn't make mistakes, which then if someone decided to go for super cheap and just did a Grok white paper and submitted it, then there might be some issues that cause them like regulatory problems and other things in the future.
Yeah, honestly, I wish Grok was able to generate a white paper to the standard that
Mm,
it's required. I even wish we tried that with OpenAI, we tried it with Gemini, with Grok, and many other models, even with DeepSeek. But the problem there is that because the output is so long, right? The average white paper that we produce uh, tops 40 pages, and these 40 pages is such a big output for the AI, first to fill in correctly, but secondly, while filling it, not to hallucinate or mess up, that a general purpose models that just don't do it. And even if they did, can you really trust technology that much to base your sort of regulatory strategy on it? I don't think so. So that's why we have a hybrid intelligence model where certified experts and then purpose-built AI join their forces and create a industry standard white paper.
yeah, for sure. So in general, um, do you see basically regulation across the world as far as crypto is concerned? Do you see it becoming much more standardized and efficient in removing a lot of that uncertainty? I know there's a few big high profile changes. Obviously, MiCA in Europe came in and made a lot of things clear, but then in the US, there was a lot of I guess, aggression against certain projects. So friends of
Yeah,
mine ran the library blockchain, and they were one of the victims of the SEC that got sued and had to shut down. And then, obviously, Dash was never actually directly targeted, but Kraken, I believe, and Coinbase had lawsuits against them for selling unregistered securities that mentioned Dash as one of the things they sold as unregistered securities, even without alleging they were. Those lawsuits now have since been dismissed. There's a lot, and then of course the big one, of course, is Ripple that has gotten the big high profile kind of attention, where you had Ripple also targeted by the SEC, and also that seems to be behind them. And in a very strange turn of events, in my opinion, almost, Richard Hart, the Hex founder, a judge ruled in his favor for a case in the U.S. And so things are getting a lot, I guess, better. But do you think that this is just a temporary thing, and that there will still be conflicts between projects that try to do the right thing and then end up getting in trouble in the future? Or do you think it's actually the sign of a new era where everyone will know exactly, kind of, for the most part, where they stand and
yeah,
what they could do?
yeah, definitely. Great that we touched on this. And before I answer, I think that regulation can either make or break the market.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very clear. If we look at the US and we look at number of crypto asset service providers registered in the US, it's just 1,000. And then if we compare it to EU, because there is a clear regulation, it's 30,000, right?
Mm,
Whereas EU is 10 times smaller than the US, if not more. Uh, so yes, to answer your question, I think US has realized it. US has often been the driver of global regulatory standards. And with the Trump administration now in, I believe that they understand that they need to play the catch-up game. That's why, for example, they very recently started to propose Genius Act, which is a very crypto-forward, industry-leading crypto regulatory framework. So yes, I believe we have entered that bullish era where regulation is playing for the favor of the industry, and we will be seeing more standardization and decent regulation as well as clarity as we move forward.
yeah, no, with obviously with technology such as AI tools, it's a lot easier to, I guess, conform to various standards and things like that. But also because crypto is so global, it could really be based in almost any country. Um, do you have any specific thoughts? I know the current U.S. administration has mentioned the idea of giving capital gains favorable capital gains treatment, or no capital gains tax, basically, on made in America cryptos, which on the one hand is a very sort of silly characterization of a crypto, like where is it made, how do you prove it? But then on the other hand, if this is something that could be provable by a standardized litmus test, then projects would, I'm sure, be extremely aggressive in trying to be qualified as a made in the US crypto.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, and I think you can draw parallels to traditional finance where there are tax havens, right?
Mm-hmm.
That in turn attracts a number of sort of traditional businesses, right? Take BVI, take Malta, and sort of other jurisdictions. Um, However, what I think will happen is market will balance itself. Yes, it is great to be based in the US and have sort of tax breaks, but also this will come with some of the limitations, right? For example, other countries also have subsidies and technology forward initiatives that would draw projects to be based in those jurisdictions. So, really, I think it's a free market choice. Wherever the market goes, investment will follow it. And I believe that at least in short term, from the US perspective, um, it's a wise choice if they go with tax breaks to go with it. Although there's always a risk of bad actors sort of taking advantage of those crypto-friendly or industry-friendly regulations, but that's then why we have other side of the regulation, which is compliance, enforcement, investor confidence, investor security, and others. So, yeah, I think it's a really balancing act, quite a complex sort of area to dive in. But I think we should wait and see where the market takes us.
Yeah, naturally. And this might be a little bit of a strange question, but it seems like so right now, if a project uses a service like Flexicheck, they're able to match the project based on what it is, what it does, and the regulatory framework, and find a way of creating of basically creating documentation that makes it more favorable towards that. But what about in the pre-launch phase? Like, do you think that in the future there will be a demand for similar services like FlexiCheck, except before even finishing conceptualizing a project, as in
Yeah.
write it and create it, launch all the tokenomics, the allocations, everything according to what would make it most favorable in certain regulatory environments?
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a lot of work to be done before you get listed, or you before you do ICO, or even do a permissionless offer, right? There is a how do you set up your company in terms of its governance structure? How do you set up the ultimate beneficiaries of the revenue that is generated by the token? What is your internal policy, and how does your team look like, and whether or not you're able to actually then prove that your team is fit for purpose as it pertains to actually implementing that project. So definitely, I think there is a lot of work to be done pre token launch, and then regulation will start to look at this as well. For example, in the traditional finance, we have the ISO certification, right, which sort of certifies a project under the following category, whether or not its cybersecurity and technical sort of implementations are up to the standards to guarantee technical security. I think we might see similar sort of um, efforts coming through where, for example, there will be a standard for how secure your smart contract should be. And there will
Mm-hmm.
be smart contract audit standards, or there can be tokenomics standards, and so on. So, yeah, I agree. We're definitely going to see that sooner or later.
Yeah, and then I guess kind of finally, what about the other way? Where do you think? So there's, for example, Amir Taki, famous Bitcoin developer, one of the first five actually. He has this project called DarkFi. The entire thing of it is to be like a decentralized DAO platform that's as private as possible, it's censorship resistant as possible. He's definitely thinking in a different way from compliance. Um, have you seen do you think that a the compliant side of the space is going to just end up eclipsing everything for the most part, or do you think there's any kind of of a potential for a surge in projects that are completely, I would say, dark in terms of they everything that you're not supposed to do from a regulatory standpoint they do, and they don't care because they're working entirely on gray markets, for example.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think really you cannot really say how much a regulation can be a catalyst for fraudulent projects
Mm-hmm.
or dark projects. I think the question that should be asked is what other than regulation can be a catalyst for dark projects to emerge? One of them is sanctions, right? For
Mm-hmm.
example, crypto has been used to avoid sanctions, for example. Or we can say we can have a discussion about terrorism financing or terrorist donations, right? Where a lot of mixers have actually been used to fund illicit actors. However, I want to make two remarks. First, crypto is actually more traceable than traditional finance because everything is public and everything is on chain. So, for example, the time for chain hours is TRM or any other on-chain fraud monitoring tool to
Mm-hmm.
catch a fraudulent transaction is much lower than, for example, me as a traditional finance regulator going to a Panama-based bank and auditing its transactions. Because before I enter Panama's Panama bank, I need to obtain a order that gives me ability from the court, that gives me ability to actually go and search those transactions. So that's one. Crypto is by nature more traceable and more transparent. And then second, as it pertains to privacy, I think there's a fine line because privacy actually plays in favor of regulation. There have been a lot of projects that focus on privacy. For example, Hinkal protocol, which is founded by Georgian people, Georgia
Mm-hmm.
founders, where I'm from. What Hinkal protocol is doing, for example, they are anonymizing transactions so that you cannot see how much and from which wallet to which wallet transaction has been made. um, and why is that critical for regulation? Actually, there are similar regulations in traditional finance, like GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which actually mandates uh, banks and financial institutions to keep the user data private. That's why you have privacy policy every time you
Mm-hmm.
open up a consumer app, right?
Of course.
But there is no such privacy policy in crypto, and that's why privacy pools and protocols have been emerging that will actually play in favor of getting crypto world more regulated.
Yeah, I guess that makes perfect sense. Well, this has been a very good chat. Very fascinating to learn all about this. I hope all the viewers think the same thing. Where could people follow you personally, and then can they check out more about Flexicheck?
Yeah, so for Flexicheck, they can just type flexicheck.ai in
Mm-hmm.
any browser and get to know about our project. And myself, I can be found on X as Shota_Natenadze, which I might link here or if possible. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
those are the two venues.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thanks very much for chatting. This has been very illuminating, and hope you have a good one.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to chat to you.